an idea of different advertisements and what they were trying to sell. And you have ideas and people saying that if you just simply take this pill, you will lose weight. Or if you join this fitness program, the pounds will just be coming off like crazy. Or if you ride this bike inside, this Peloton or whatever it is, that you will get fit. There's products saying that if you put on this product on your hair, that you will grow more hair. There's products on the flip side that say, well, this will help you get rid of unwanted hair. You have products saying this will make your skin look better, that if you just put this on your face, you will look more radiant. And it's very tough for us to be content. That maybe people will say if you eat at certain places, that you will have better food than your competitors, that if you drink certain drinks, you will have more energy than you might with drinking other brands, or if you go on this fancy trip, or you take this fancy vacation, your family will have more fun. And I think it's hard for us to be satisfied. It's hard for us to find that contentment. One of the things that I notice dealing with teenagers is that they are oftentimes very unhappy in their own skin. That teenagers that are short want to be taller. But on the flip side, teenagers that are taller maybe wish they weren't so tall. That girls with straight hair wish they had curly hair. People with curly hair wish they had straighter hair. And it's not like no matter what we do, we're not okay with ourselves. And this idea of being discontent, I think has been around since the beginning. If you go back to the garden, if you go back to Adam and Eve, it's really what gets them in trouble in the first place. It's the fact that they are not content with their current situations, that God has provided for them everything. God has given them food. God has given them shelter. God has provided for these people. And yet, what gets them in trouble is this serpent who says, God has given you all this stuff. But if you take from that fruit, from that tree, you'll get more. And so, ever since the beginning, our human race has been struggling with contentment. You can't hardly get out of Egypt with the Israelites before they start complaining that they have food provided for them. Manna miraculously appears on the ground every single day. But the people are not content with that. God provides quail for the Israelites, and the people begin to grumble and complain. And it's not very long before they cross the Red Sea that they are wanting to go back and say, we were better off as slaves in Egypt. And perhaps that discontentment continues to grow with the people even as they get into the promised land. That God provides them this land flowing with milk and honey, that they get everything they want, that the food is easy to come by, that they are able to defeat nations that are larger than them, that this small little country, this small little group of people are able to do the unimaginable, to conquer huge nations, but yet they're not content. They're not okay just to simply have God as their king, but they begin to want to be like everybody else, to have a king like the surrounding nations, to be like them. And so I think contentment is who we are. We struggle with this idea of being content, and it's been around for as long as we have been humans, as long as the race has existed, we have dealt with contentment. And so this morning we're going to be looking at Philippians 4. Philippians 4. If you got your Bibles, you might want to flip there. We're going to be starting in verse 10. But this is the end of the letter to Philippians, the last chapter, and Paul is really starting to hammer the people, and he's really wanting to kind of get the idea across of what it means for them. This is his parting shots to these folks. And he's going to say earlier in chapter 4, rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all, and don't be anxious about anything. And so Paul's just throwing all these ideas at them, and this is kind of Paul as he's wrapping up Philippians 4. And he's going to say this in verse 10. It's on the screen, and hopefully you'll see it at home as well. But he's going to say this. I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you have been concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or living in want. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. And for us, I think a lot of times we use that Philippians 4:13 as this magnet verse. It's the verse we put on our wall, that I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. That for some of us, I think we mean that we can, through God's strength, we can run through walls. That through God's strength, some of our people, some of our college kids, some of our teenagers might think that they can get into a prestigious college because it's through God who gives them strength. That maybe they can major in things that they shouldn't major in and have all these things in their life because it's God who gives them strength. And it's kind of like they feel like God is just simply writing them a blank check and that it's theirs to cash, that they can do with it as they want. But the context here is bigger. That what Paul's really saying is not kind of this name it and claim it. You get whatever you want through God who gives you strength. But it's more in the context of contentment. That Paul's saying he knows what it's like to be hungry. He knows what it's like to have food. And either way he goes, whatever comes his way, he can do it because it's God who gives him strength. Not his own power, but it is God who is empowering him. So it's not the context of just doing whatever you want, but it is in the context of perhaps being content. We're going to have to switch mics real quick. All right, is that any better? I think so. Sorry, I think we're getting a lot of feedback on the last mic, so maybe this one will be a little bit better. But this idea for contentment comes from the Greek word autarkes. And autarkes is a word that the Greek Stoics loved. That in the 1st and 2nd and 3rd century, these Stoic philosophers loved this word autarkes, this word for contentment. And this word meant sufficient, to be able to suffice. It literally means in the Greek, sufficient to self. And really the Stoics loved this word and elevated this word because to them it was this ability to be free from all wants and needs. It was the chief of the virtues for them. And, you might not know all about the Stoic philosophies, but a lot of us know these ideas of putting on a stoic face, that you have a firm expression, that you kind of just grin and bear it, and you don't let the world influence your life around you. And so for the Stoics, this idea of contentment was kind of to separate themselves from the world around them, that they felt like they could do better and be better if they could just kind of physically distance themselves from emotions. That no matter what was going on in the world around them, they felt that they could have contentment in spite of all the circumstances if they could just simply detach, if they could be indifferent from the emotions that surrounded them. And so that was the Stoic philosophy, and that was the Stoic idea. And that's kind of what a lot of people understood in the 1st century, this idea of contentment, that it was a very Stoic word. But Paul takes this word and flips it on its head. He takes this Stoic idea and makes it godly. And he says, yes, you're going to have contentment, but it's not because you are sufficient to yourself. That you have contentment, that you are able to do all things because it's him who gives you strength. That this self-sufficiency is not a result of the power you exert for your flesh and your old self. But through the power of the new self and the Holy Spirit, you have your strength. And so Paul takes this very Stoic idea and says, you're content, not because you separate yourself, not because you distance yourself from the emotions, but you are content because you have God who's going to give you the ability to do all things, to be content, even in the most difficult situations. Paul's going to say that he's learned what it's like to be content, whatever the circumstances. And I hate the fact that he used the word learn, I wish that Paul said it's just something that we develop over the years, that it's something that as we grow older, we get better at being content. But that's not what Paul says at all. Paul says he's had to learn what it's like to be content, that it is not something that he has just picked up naturally, but it is something that he's had to struggle with, something that he has had to try to develop. And so I think it is something that maybe does not come naturally to us. And it's something that if we are not careful with, we're going to struggle with this idea of contentment. And so for us, I just want to give you 5 ways this morning that I think we can be better at being content. That we're just going to kind of have a practical lesson. And maybe you just want to pick a few of these this week and look at ways that you can add contentment to your life. Perhaps there's areas in your life that you feel like you need to be more content. And so maybe you want to pick 1 or 2 of these and just focus this week on what it means for you to be content. And so the first way I think that we can be more content, and once again, these are not magic bullets or end-all be-alls that are just going to simply take care of all your contentment issues, but perhaps ways that we can work on contentment and gratitude and thanksgiving. But I think the first thing we can do is take a moment to be grateful. And we talked about this a lot last week of how really blessed we are. That if you are simply here this morning, if you are able to watch online, that you are blessed. That a lot of people in our world do not have the ability to go and meet freely. That I think the stat last week was over 3 billion people in the world cannot go to a religious service of their choosing. They cannot go to a political rally of their choosing, that they are restricted. And so by you simply being able to gather here this morning, you are blessed. If we lined up 100 people across the front of this room and we set the poorest people on one side and the richest people on the opposite side, based on the worldly standards, we are all going to be in the top, probably 1 or 2 people worldwide in wealth. And we talked about last week how most of the world lives on $1 or $2 a day. And that's coffee for a lot of us in the morning. Our coffee might actually be far more expensive than $1 or $2 a day. And so for us, maybe this week, you take a moment to be grateful. And for me, I'm a very critical person, that if you're into the Enneagram, and I know some people are like, no, that's not real or not true, but I'm an Enneagram 1. And so I'm just naturally a very critical person, that after this lesson this afternoon, I will begin working for next week. Because there's stuff that has happened in this lesson that I don't like. And so I'm going to want to try to be better and be critical of myself and look for ways to get better. And I'm naturally just not a very grateful person. And so for me this week, it might look like being less critical of others or being less critical of myself and being grateful. The second thing I think we can do this week to be more content is to grumble and complain less. That we live in a society that really kind of likes to show what we feel. That we have social media platforms that some people, all they do is simply just tell their thoughts and tell what's going on and give reviews, good or bad, of restaurants. And we just kind of live in a society where we can grumble and complain and give reviews about anything. We took many years ago a trip to Honduras. We'd go every year to Honduras. And this is a trip we took, it's probably, 8-9 years ago. This is Riven Farrell, who's Joel and Robin Farrell's son. And this is a picture of Riven working in Honduras. And you can kind of see after a good hard day's work, he's pretty dirty. And Riven was a pretty big guy, still is a big guy, and still was able just to kind of lift a lot. But in these Honduras trips, we had a few rules. And we actually had a lot of rules to get teenagers to Honduras. But one of our rules was that you did not grumble, complain, or argue on the trip. That whatever came, whatever you had to do, you did it. You just kind of grinned and bared it. That you did not let anything that happened break you down. That you just went with the flow. And so, as you can see, the work was hard in Honduras. And if you can, pray for these people this week. That they've already dealt with Hurricane Eta that came through a few weeks ago. It looks like they're about to be squarely in the bullseye for another hurricane coming up in a few days. This is a picture of Adam Weigel, another picture from perhaps a few years ago. He's actually a youth minister now up in Huntsville. But he's digging a pit. He's digging a hole about 6 feet high and dug it by hand. And that's kind of the work that we were subjected to in Honduras. And it was kind of the idea that it's a business trip. You're not going for yourself. You're not going just to have fun, but you are going to serve. And whatever comes, you don't grumble and you don't complain about it. And so one trip we took, the girls' side, after working hard all day, the girls had hot water in their cabins. On the boys' side, however, there was no hot water to be had. And so our motto was, you don't complain. And so we forced the guys to take showers, that this water that was, I don't know where it was coming from, probably like a well dug in the side of a mountain somewhere in Honduras, just ice cold, freezing water. But we forced them because it's like, you've been sweating and nasty all day. You're going to take a shower. We're not going to let you get in bed at night without bathing. And so we forced people to take showers in the freezing cold, and they just kind of grinned and bared it. And after about 3 or 4 days of taking cold showers, one of the directors of this mission in Honduras came to us and said, "Do you know you've been taking cold showers this whole time?" It's like, yeah, we are well aware that we are taking cold showers. And he said, "Why didn't you just tell us? We could have flipped a switch. You could have had hot water." And we're thinking to ourselves, man, we were so mad, but that was our motto. That is what we did, that we were not going to grumble and complain about anything on that trip. And maybe for you this week, that is something you need to work on. That maybe you need to work on grumbling and complaining less. And perhaps it will change your mindset. Perhaps it will change the way you look at things. The third thing I think we can do is don't compare. That we get oftentimes into this comparison trap where we compare our houses to other people's houses, that we want more square footage, that we want more bang for our buck, that we want better cars. And it's kind of humbling for me. I have an 07 Honda Accord, and every day I get to sit in this parking lot and watch as college kids drive by in BMWs and Lexus cars, and man, they have better cars than I do, and it's easy to begin to compare stuff and compare statuses. Maybe for you, you compare where you are in life to other people. That maybe up to this point in your life has not gone as you see fit. That maybe you see other people around, and this happens to young adults all the time, and college kids that we have in the teen program that move up to the college group, and once they move up, they graduate. And maybe for some of them, they don't think their life is where it should be compared to others. Maybe they don't have the kind of job that the other people and other friends have. Maybe they don't have the kind of relationship or serious boyfriend or girlfriend or even be married at the age of 24 or 25 or whenever they think they should be. And maybe for them, they begin to compare their life and compare their journey to other people's journey and find themselves maybe not as successful as other people their age. And I think it's a struggle for us to deal with that contentment. And maybe this week, you compare yourself less. Maybe you turn off the social media and the Facebook where people are constantly being compared and people are constantly showing their best face when sometimes it's not even reality. I know I've had teenagers post on Instagram. They don't really post on Facebook. They're kind of off Facebook now. But they post on Instagram very good pictures of their friends. And on the outside, it looks like everything's going well. On the outside, it seems like their life is perfect. But there's been a couple times where I've seen them post those pictures, and I really know what's going on behind the scenes, and their life is far from perfect. That they look like from the pictures, everything's okay, but really behind the scenes, they are not all right. And so maybe this week, you stop comparing yourself and what you have and what you don't have, and what you think you should be like compared to other people. And maybe you get off this comparison trap. The fourth thing I think we can do is tell people that we appreciate them. This has been a tough year for a lot of people, and there's been a lot of frontline workers, people that haven't got off work, people that have working at Walmart and fast food that have to work in very difficult conditions with the virus. There's people in our congregation that work at the hospital. There's many, even in our congregation right now as I speak, that tomorrow they're going to have to go to EAMC and be on the front lines. There are people that are dealing with mental health issues of folks that are being just going through difficult times and having to deal with other folks and just the pandemic and all the struggles that are going on. And maybe this morning, or perhaps this week, you need to tell other people, thank you. That maybe as we leave this morning, you need to tell somebody you appreciate them. I know it's been a weird year for all of us. And church has been different, and life has been different, and decisions seem to change by the day of what we should do and what we shouldn't do. And it's been tough, even on our elders. I know especially, I can't remember ever a time when people have had to go through this. And so maybe you just say thank you and show people your appreciation sometime this week. The last thing I think we can do for contentment is to give. Is to give our resources, to give our time. And I love what Robin said, to give money to church or whatever it is that we need. That there is scientific study and scientific research that says that giving actually makes you more content, that giving makes you feel better about yourself. And there's a research that was done out of the University of Chicago a few years ago. And what they did is they had two groups of people. They had one group of people that every day they gave them a $5 bill for 3 weeks. So $5 in their hands, they do nothing for it. They just receive the $5 and go on about their day, and that is it. There's another group of people that received the $5, but they received the $5 every day for 3 weeks with the caveat that they had to give that money away. So you got it. One group gets to keep the money. They get to pocket it, do whatever they want, put it in their wallet, put it in their purse. They can forget about it if they want. The other group had to give. They could not keep the money. And what they found after this experiment was over was that the group who just got the money and got to keep it kind of forgot they even got the $5 in the first place. That they went about their day as normal, they put the money in their pocket, and at the end of the study, they wound up a little bit richer, but nothing really changed in their life. The second group they found were actually happier trying to give the money away. That the second group that didn't receive anything, they didn't get to keep the money at all, but they had to find ways to give it, actually ended up happier because they had to go give it to somebody that was in need. Or that as they were getting their morning coffee, they had to put that $5 in the tip jar. Or maybe they offered the money to somebody on the side of the road that was struggling. Or perhaps they paid for the person behind them their meal in the drive-thru. And so they were constantly looking for ways each day to get rid of the money. And they found that by giving, they actually were happier. And I know there's all kinds of studies out there that say this, that people who give are far more content. And so for you, maybe you want to take one or two of these ideas this week and find ways to develop it and find ways to just saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do this week to gain contentment. The difficult thing about contentment is that Paul has said, no matter the circumstances, he's learned what it is to be content. And I think at the core of contentment is this idea that you believe in God's peace, that God's peace is greater than the problems of this world, that though things might not be going well for you, maybe they are, but though things might not be going well in your life, that God's peace and contentment is greater than the world's problems. That true contentment is when our eyes are fixed on God and fixed on His Spirit and in the work that He's doing, rather than our external circumstances. This was a Facebook post, and I didn't actually pull it from Facebook because I wasn't sure with copyright issues what we could show and what we couldn't show. But sometimes I look for an illustration to find a point and kind of to wrap up well with sermons. And sometimes these illustrations are hard to find, but this one just kind of hit me between the eyes this week. And this is a picture of a little girl. This is one of Lydia and mine's friends from college. Caroline Dockery is the person's name. And Caroline was Lydia's roommate, I guess, for almost all 4 years of college. And Caroline married Luke Dockery, who now is a youth minister in Searcy, Arkansas. And they got married, and they had a daughter that was born with, I guess, a form of like muscular dystrophy. And this girl, her name is Kinsley. Kinsley is mentally handicapped. She's physically handicapped and will not be able to live probably a normal life by most standards. And so this week, as I was just kind of scrolling through Facebook, this article, this kind of post hit my attention of Caroline Dockery posting this. And she is actually going to use Philippians 4 in reference to her daughter, Kinsley. And so here's what the post says. It says, life isn't easy all the time. Kinsley, who's their daughter, pictured up above. Kinsley's seizures have made her lethargic and interested in little. But I've been trying to live Philippians 4, that I have learned, whatever the circumstances, to be content, that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Life is hard, but we can make it through with Jesus. It does not mean that life is totally easy and perfect. No, it means that we will have hope for something perfect eventually. That we can push on knowing what lies ahead. So today, and I think this was earlier this week, probably Monday or Tuesday, she was out at a playground with Kinsley and their youngest son. So she says, today, I can choose to push on and enjoy the beautiful fall that we are having and relish in the small smile I was able to get from Kinsley. Thank you, Lord, for the small blessings in life. And true contentment is not simply all your problems going away. It's not what Paul's getting at. That true contentment comes in understanding that our peace with God is greater than the world's problems. I couldn't help this week but to think of Matthew 6, and that's kind of the way we're going to end this morning. With this idea of what Jesus says on the Sermon on the Mount to us. And it goes really well with contentments. He says in verse 25, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more important than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your life? And this morning, like I said, I don't know where everybody's at, that maybe you are content. Maybe you have learned what Paul has been teaching us, the ability to be content. But maybe this is a struggle for you. Maybe this is something that you have a hard time with, of having gratitude and having contentment. And so this morning, we want to help you, that if you need God's peace in your life, if you need to give your life over to Him, to be baptized, we want to give you that opportunity, that we want to be here for you. That you might be struggling with some issues right now with peace. You might not feel peace in your heart. And we would love to help you in any way that we can. And so Bob Godoskis is going to kind of come and pray for us this morning. And on his way up here, if we can help you, or if we can catch you in the back, or pull us aside, we would love to talk to you more about contentment.